Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the Toshiba L50, in my case the B-F2H. The specs as always are on the side. It is a 15.6 inch media all-round desktop laptop, I would say, because it is more for multimedia desktop. It is definitely meant more as a desktop replacement than something portable, at least in my opinion, but that is the case for every 15.6 inch. As you can see, it is quite thin still, and if we take a closer look on the lid here, it is very glossy, and also the lid, as on most other Toshibas, is a little bit flimsy. The same can be said if we open it right now. If you can see just real quick, it does wobble a little bit, but that is pretty much the only smaller weakness of this chassis, because if we check the rest, here we have the port for the charging, Ethernet gigabit, USB 2.0, the optical drive. On the front we have the full-size SD card slot, and on the right hand side we have the combined headphone microphone jack, two USB 3.0, one with power share, full-size HDMI, VGA ports for the vents. On the back we don't have a removable battery, but still the bottom is quite solid, no problems here at all. And like I said, the only issue I would have here is the slightly flimsy lid that does wobble a little bit, but the rest is absolutely solid. We have a good amount of ports, no issues here. The speakers are here at the top. Otherwise it is a quite solid keyboard. If we check it a little bit closer, and let me zoom in for that, the keyboard itself is done quite nice, but it is not at the very best level because it is a little bit shallow. Otherwise the feedback is quite okay, so I have no problem with the keyboard. But if you plan to type for longer periods of time, then it could be not an issue, but because there are just better ones. If they would have used the one on the P50, then it would be amazing, because that one had such a great feedback and key travel and so on. This one is just slightly above average, but it still gets the job done quite good. The only thing I'm mostly missing here is the keyboard backlight, which is a little bit of a shame. Otherwise, if we check the touchpad, it is slightly sticky, but otherwise it works okay. The size is okay. It is as we check the click sounds good. And if there's also one good thing I will show you just real quick in terms of the software, and I will zoom out for that again. There is quite a little nice bonus here in the software options, and I've already talked about it. I like Toshiba doing this, because as you can see here, you have these options for multi-finger gestures, so 2, 3, 4 finger gestures to get it open. But one small issue I had, I couldn't really get them activated all the time. As you can see here now, you can switch within the apps. This is done with a 4-finger swipe, so sometimes they work reliable, but not always. So this is maybe a smaller downside. To sum up the design and build quality, like I said, the device is quite solid. The only thing is the slightly wobbly lid. The rest is okay. We have a good amount of ports. Keyboard is slightly above average. The touchpad is very customizable, which is nice, but therefore the 2-finger, 3-finger recognition wasn't maybe the best, but still okay. If we check the display now, we have 15.6 inches and full HD IPS, which is definitely nice. And let me quickly go back here. It is quite sharp, no problems here at all. I still think 1080p on a device like this is a great value if done right, which they did here, because if we check the maximum brightness, it is a very bright display. And the good thing is, in most cases in a normal lit room, I was fine with 60%, where on the P50 I definitely needed more, but it is great. One thing there is to mention though, and that's the reason why I have closed my curtains. It is an extremely glossy panel, and you will see a lot of reflections. So if you have a window behind you, then it could be an issue. Otherwise, the white, really nicely balanced, no problems here at all. Good white point and very solid, very pleasant. The black is very deep, and maybe one of the highlights, because as you can also see here, the contrast is very great. Colors very accurate, very vibrant, very vivid, but not punchy, so quite realistic still. But what I think is the highlight here of this display is if you watch a lot of videos, because of the great contrast ratio, the great black with pretty much no light bleed. I have only a little bit of light bleed here. It is a joy to use within the browser, no problems here at all, very sharp everything. But for videos and movies especially, it does an extraordinary well job just because of the great calibration and the great, I would say, contrast ratio and so on. Let's check the sound now. I will start it off. Like I said, we have front facing speakers here, as you can see them. It looks a bit small, but actually the performance is quite great. And let me quickly go into the software and show you one thing. We have smart audio available, which is nice. You have a lot of options here to set up the headphones, the speakers and so on. But the best thing here is DTS, because it gives you advanced options for bass, mids and also highs. You even have an equalizer and options like surround, volume max and even a slightly bass boost. And these options definitely should be used, what I did, because out of the box with these turned off, the sound wasn't really that great. But how does it behave with it turned on? Let's check it. So yeah, like I said, with DTS and all the sound properly optimized, you get a really nice sound. Loudness or maximum volume was totally fine. We have a little bit of bass. Mids were really nice because for male voices and also women's voices was nice. And even the highs were maybe slightly toned down, but not like muffled or so, but just not to be harsh, which is quite nice. So the overall sound balance is great. I'm completely fine with the sound. There are maybe better solutions, but so far this is still one of the better ones. As for the performance, we have an Intel i5 5200U, so 5th generation Broadwell CPU, and I have to say it makes a great job, and I won't really show off anything because there is no need for it. Of course, modern UI apps run perfectly fine, browsing was a joy, everything was smooth, everything was very responsive, everything was very snappy, I had no slowdowns. We have 8 gigabytes, maybe there is a 16 gigabyte version, but I don't think so. But I think for a multimedia all-rounder, 8 gigabytes is still enough. Video editing was a joy because of the very fast, and let's quickly check that, the very fast SSD. And I have to say these values are great, 500 read and 450 writes. So we have a really fast SSD built in, which is nice because usually I only reviewed Toshiba devices with a spinning hard drive, and I wasn't really surprised or impressed with the performance because of the slow hard drive. But here in this one, it is definitely noticeable that you have an SSD built in, because video rendering and access times and everything was a joy. Performance for video rendering itself at the end was also great, and if you have something compatible with QuickSync, it will be even better. Otherwise, for the gaming performance, we have an ATI discrete graphics card to do 60 built in, but I wouldn't expect more than maybe 1080p games with lower settings. So it is more slightly low end to maybe mid end, so don't expect too much here. But as it is for word processing, video rendering, photo rendering, and all that, it does a really great job. So the 5th generation is also great, and that leads me to the battery, because there the CPU does a great job as well. A full charge takes about 2 hours and 40 minutes, which is still okay. We have a 54 milliwatt hours battery, not the biggest one, but the battery life itself is really great. I usually got something between 5 to closer to 6 hours in my use with 60% brightness, and I expect people to get even way more than 6 hours, because I usually get way less than any other reviewer. So I would expect people maybe even getting 7 hours or more out of this, and with lower brightness even better. But with a higher mixed use, so more video rendering and so on, I got about 4 hours, which is still solid. But usually I would expect, if I go and do some video rendering, I would plug it in anyways, so that's not the issue. What I wanted to show you for the heat and noise, I did a heat test and it didn't throttle. Even after half an hour of 100% CPU load, it was still doing its full performance. But the great thing about this device is the noise, actually, because in idle mode and just browsing and typing, so all the normal stuff, the lightweight tasks, it is, I would say, 90-95% silent. If it's not silent, at least it's so quiet that you won't really notice it. Sometimes I really had to check if the fans is spinning, because if the fans were spinning really subtle, but like I said, most of the times they didn't even. Under full load though, let's quickly check how loud they become, and I have to say it's not a lot. We have to wait a little bit until they spin up, but I can already tell you it is not, and I'm not even sure if I can get them, but they should. Okay, that's it. I guess you can hear that. That is the first step you usually hear. This is what you most of the times hear if they get a little bit louder. After 5 minutes of 100% CPU load, there is a second step which is a little bit louder, but still, for the power you get here, more than acceptable. It wasn't unpleasant or so, it was very evenly distributed, and definitely I'm okay with this sound. With this noise level, absolutely no problems here. So the noise levels are great as well. Maybe it can be done even quieter, but I in normal use never had it. And if I did some CPU intensive stuff, I had my headphones on anyways and didn't even bother anyways. As for the software, if we take a closer look once again, there is not that much to tell. It is Windows 8.1 and after all, because we have a lot of stuff installed, pre-installed, which isn't maybe the best. We have like apps, as you can see here also. There is a lot of games pre-installed. I would call these things bloat, but they can be uninstalled and it's not the biggest issue. So I am actually fine with that. So let's get to the recap here, not to make it any longer, because I am quite positively surprised with this device. So design and build quality, like I said, maybe not the most premium feeling one, because they could have built it maybe a bit sturdier, mostly the lid. The rest is solid. Good amount of ports, good placement, everything done well here. The keyboard itself maybe wasn't the best, but does more than a solid job, works for all the things, as long as you don't plan to type on it pretty much all the time, because then there are better solutions out there. But if you type sometimes for a few hours and so, it's totally fine. The touchpad, the trackpad itself, I'm personally just not a big touchpad fan. Whenever I can, I use my mouse, and in this case I would. The good thing though is we have a few good setting options that allow us to have 3-finger, 4-finger gestures. It is not on a Mac level, but still okay. 2-finger, 3-finger, and 4-finger recognition didn't always work properly, because I maybe it's also a thing of my fingers, but it's okay. As for the display, I would say this is the highlight of this device, because the display was very sharp, but the great thing was the calibration and the quality of itself. Great black levels, very bright, very vivid, very nice contrast ratio, especially great for watching videos and so on. So it does a really great job, and it is one of the best 1080p displays in this range. I didn't test many 15.6 inches, but you don't need free 4K display, because this has no scaling issues and all, and does a great job. Sound, maybe not as great as the display, but still very good, because loud enough, good tonal balance, overall nice job. It was actually nice because I used the P50, which also had actually bigger speakers at the top, but those actually didn't sound as nicely stereo as this one here. So a nice stereo immersive effect, all great here. Performance was also absolutely great. 5th generation ULV CPU. In most tasks I didn't notice it any bigger difference compared to maybe even a quad core than I used on the P50 for normal tasks. For heavier tasks, of course, you will notice a difference, but since this is more of a multimedia all-rounder, it will be more than capable for all the things. The good thing was the hyper threading and everything worked really nice. I mean the turbo boost and so on. Brilliant. Didn't throttle, that is great, and that also leads me to the battery life, with about 5, at least in my opinion, to 6 hours, which should be still be able to achieve, and I think more people will even get more than 6 hours out of this, so it is very power efficient. Great job done here as well. Noise levels are also very solid. Most of the cases pretty much silent, totally, and even under full load I never was unpleasantly annoyed by it. So yeah, it is noticeable, but of course you have to have some noise under full load. But in my usual tasks, I was totally fine with that. Software, Windows 8.1, and once Windows 10 will be released, even better. But so far it did a great job, was completely stable, completely fine. Leads me to my end. Would I recommend it? Of course, this is always a regional thing. I don't know about the price where you are, but I can't really talk for this specific model, because what I like about this model is the SSD. But would I recommend it? And for a friend, for a colleague of mine, for his son, I checked the market and saw what all the things where he wanted, and I recommended him the L50, but a lower end model, which was in this price range pretty much unbeatable. It had an, I think, 1 or 2 terabyte hard drive that was still okay in terms of speed, and all the other insides were pretty much the same. So the great display, the great sound, 8 gigabytes of RAM. So that was a real value, amazing deal. This particular model, at least here, costs $750, which I think is still worth the price just because of the SSD. Maybe there are some other lower end models, but I would, if possible, go for an SSD, because personally it just enhances the experience a lot. Maybe you can also get a lower end model and just put one yourself in, but I would definitely recommend it if you want it more as a desktop station, because if you want to be out and about, then the display is just a little bit too glossy and maybe the little bit too wobbly. But the only downside pretty much is the slightly wobbly display. Otherwise, I can't really say anything bad. Backlit, the keyboard could have been backlit, would have definitely improved a lot, because this is actually the one reason why he didn't want to get it himself, because he really wanted backlit. Personally, I didn't mind it even, because I used this device without the backlit, and since the display is getting some light on the keys, I didn't have even that big of an issue as I thought I would, as maybe on 13.3 inches where I just don't get too much light. So to sum it up, I am quite surprised positively with this device. It did a great job for what it is. Not really much to complain, as you saw. So yeah, that is my review of the Toshiba L50. I hope you liked it. Let me know what you think. Please subscribe, rate, and comment. Until next time, bye.